My envious sister desperately pleaded for my forgiveness, after she went to extreme lengths, including paying my ex-boyfriend, to deliberately ruin my baby shower. She falsely claimed that the baby was his, which led to such a severe fallout that our parents now refuse to have any contact with her. Hello everyone, I'm a 28-year-old woman who recently experienced a baby shower that turned out to be nothing like what I had envisioned. The event was supposed to be a joyful celebration of my impending motherhood, but instead, it became a nightmare, leading me to share my story here today. To provide some background, I have an older sister named Rebecca, who is 32 years old. Throughout our lives, Rebecca has always been the golden child of our family. She excelled in every aspect, whether it was academically or in other endeavors. Growing up, she was the standout child, the one who achieved the highest grades, won numerous accolades, and was admired by everyone around her. In contrast, I often felt like I was living in her shadow. My parents frequently used Rebecca as the benchmark against which they measured my accomplishments, which placed immense pressure on me. I won't deny that this was incredibly challenging, because I realized early on that I wasn't suited for the same pursuits Rebecca thrived in. Academically, I wasn't poor, but I struggled with certain subjects like science. This led me to believe that my parents might have subconsciously perceived me as less capable, even though they never explicitly said so. It was evident that they were more disappointed in me for not matching Rebecca's achievements. Rebecca pursued a career in medicine, attending medical school with great success. On the other hand, I chose to follow a different path, obtaining a degree in business, which aligned with my own career aspirations. I had no interest in replicating Rebecca's professional journey, and this divergence was just one aspect of why we never quite got along. Rebecca's strong personality, coupled with her arrogance and ego, created a tense sibling dynamic. Even when I excelled in something, like dancing, which I still love and am good at, Rebecca couldn't tolerate it. She often made subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, remarks to downplay my successes, ensuring that all the attention remained on herself. Every time I achieved something, Rebecca would put on a face, attempting to redirect the spotlight back to her own accomplishments, further intensifying our rivalry. Despite these challenges, our parents tried their best to treat us equally, presenting it as though everything was fair and balanced between us. Deep down, however, I knew that their pride leaned more towards Rebecca. After moving out and finishing high school, Rebecca and I began to establish a more civil relationship, maintaining a cordial relationship primarily during holidays and family gatherings. Although there's still underlying tension and mutual resentment, it no longer affects me as profoundly as it once did. However, it's clear that Rebecca still struggles with not being the center of attention and continues to seek validation through overachievement. One area where I surprisingly found an edge over Rebecca was in my personal relationships. Despite not viewing romantic relationships as a competition, Rebecca seemed unsettled by the fact that I was married and expecting my first child, even though I'm younger than she is. My husband, Rick, who is 30 years old, and I have been together for nearly 3 years. We got married a year ago, and just a few months after our wedding, we discovered that I was pregnant. Naturally, we were overjoyed and shared the news with our friends and family a few weeks later. My parents were particularly thrilled, and our relationship with them has since improved significantly. After graduating from college, I opened up to my parents about the difficulties I faced during my childhood. I explained how Rebecca was often held up as the ideal and how this constant comparison put immense pressure on me. To my relief, my parents apologized sincerely, admitting that they hadn't realized the unfair comparisons they were making. They assured me that they loved both of us equally and promised to be better parents moving forward. This conversation helped heal some of the old wounds, and our relationship has been much stronger since then. While my parents even attempted to mend the strained relationship between Rebecca and me, Rebecca made it clear that she wasn't interested in improving our bond. Accepting this reality, I chose to let go of trying to force a relationship that wasn't meant to be. Rebecca's personality, always being self-centered and boastful about her own achievements, made it clear that a friendship with her wasn't something I desired. I'm genuinely happy for Rebecca's successes, but her constant need to highlight them has become exhausting. I've always been able to celebrate her achievements without feeling threatened, but she has never reciprocated that happiness for me. Her lack of support was evident during significant moments in my life. She showed a disinterested, or even negative attitude at my engagement, my wedding, and when I announced my pregnancy. The culmination of her antagonism occurred at my baby shower, when she went to extreme lengths to sabotage the event, actions that were so egregious that I doubt anyone could ever forgive her. She even brought along my ex-boyfriend, Kurt, as an uninvited guest, which added another layer of chaos to the event. Speaking of Kurt, my relationship with him was tumultuous from the start. We began dating in my first year of college, but it was anything but stable. Kurt was manipulative and abusive, constantly accusing me of infidelity, and not being as committed to the relationship as he was. Despite my efforts to end things after discovering his infidelity, he refused to let go, continuing to harass me and speak ill of me to my friends and family. His behavior was so toxic that it took me 4 years to finally break free from the cycle of on and off relationships, during which my self-esteem plummeted, and I battled with depression. My family was aware of the difficulties I faced with Kurt, and yet, Rebecca still decided to involve him in my baby shower, knowing full well the history we shared. A few weeks before my baby shower, I learned from friends that Rebecca had been inquiring about Kurt's whereabouts, pretending to be curious, but with ulterior motives. Suspecting something was amiss, I chose not to invite her to the shower, discussing my concerns with both Rick and my parents. While my parents were hesitant about this decision, they ultimately respected it. However, Rebecca somehow found out about the details of the baby shower, likely through other relatives who had been invited. On the day of the event, everything was proceeding smoothly until, about an hour in, Kurt unexpectedly arrived at my home. Without any security measures in place, he walked right in, handing over a stack of documents to Rick. This sudden appearance left me utterly bewildered and unable to respond. Kurt then made the shocking declaration that he had been having an affair with me for the past 6 months, and insisted that the baby was his, citing the timing of conception as proof. He demanded his rights as a father and threatened partial custody if a paternity test confirmed his claims. Despite his accusations, which were entirely false, chaos ensued. I experienced a severe emotional breakdown, fearing the rumors that might spread, even though Rick and my parents knew the truth. Kurt's fabricated evidence, mere printouts of fake conversations, only served to confuse the guests, who quickly sided with me as they saw through his lies. Overwhelmed by the situation, I retreated to my room, crying myself to sleep as the night wore on. The next day, Rick filled me in on the aftermath. Guests had left shortly after the fiasco, and I felt a profound sense of embarrassment. My immediate reaction was to apologize to everyone via text and then confront the individual I suspected was behind this ordeal, Rebecca. However, directly accusing her would have backfired, as she would deny involvement and escalate the situation. Instead, Rick and I decided to approach Kurt to uncover the truth, believing someone must have manipulated him into making these false accusations. To my surprise, Kurt responded to my messages, expressing remorse and attributing his actions to Rebecca's influence. He even provided screenshots of conversations between him and Rebecca, revealing that she had financially incentivized him to disrupt my baby shower intentionally. Armed with this evidence, I blocked Kurt again and shared the screenshots with my parents. They were as shocked as I was, unable to comprehend why Rebecca would go to such lengths. I informed my parents that I could no longer maintain a relationship with Rebecca, and demanded that they choose between her and me. Without hesitation, they chose to stand by me, condemning Rebecca's actions as unfair and unjustifiable. Shortly after, Rebecca attempted to visit me, pleading for reconciliation and apologizing profusely. However, I refused to open the door, knowing she would only bring more trouble. Her persistent crying outside my home, despite my clear boundaries, only reinforced my decision to distance myself from her. As days passed, I felt a pang of guilt over the ultimatum I had set for my parents, wondering if I had been too harsh. However, after discussing the situation further with my parents, I learned more about Rebecca's recent struggles. She had recently gone through a painful breakup, as her long-term boyfriend ended their relationship to pursue a career opportunity in another state. This heartbreak likely contributed to her erratic behavior and heightened jealousy over my successful relationships and impending motherhood. Despite understanding some of her pain, I couldn't overlook the fact that she had orchestrated such a malicious act by involving Kurt to tarnish my reputation and disrupt my family life. In light of everything that had transpired, I found it necessary to take further action to protect myself and my family. The situation escalated when Rebecca showed up at my husband's workplace, refusing to leave and causing a scene that jeopardized his professional commitments. This unwelcome intrusion prompted me to take decisive measures. I contacted the receptionist at Rick's office, explaining the severity of the situation, and requesting that Rebecca be escorted out if she didn't leave voluntarily. Despite my attempts to reason with her over the phone, Rebecca remained obstinate, leading to her eventual removal by security. This incident underscored the urgent need for legal protection. Taking advice from supportive comments, Rick and I consulted with a lawyer and decided to file for a restraining order against Rebecca. My parents supported this decision wholeheartedly, recognizing the potential danger Rebecca's continued actions pose to our well-being. While a restraining order may not completely eliminate the risk of future confrontations, it provides a legal safeguard, ensuring that any further harassment could result in her arrest, thereby deterring her from making additional attempts to harm us. Despite the tumultuous events, we continue to prioritize our family's safety and peace of mind. The realization that Rebecca's actions were driven by a combination of personal heartbreak and long-standing jealousy has provided some closure, yet the wounds remain. As we move forward, the focus remains on healing and building a supportive environment for our growing family, free from the toxicity that Rebecca introduced into our lives. Update 1. Thank you so much for all the supportive comments. I guess the hormones were indeed affecting me because, after 2 days, I started to feel differently about the situation. Initially, I had been taking all the stress upon myself due to Rebecca's intense emotional outbursts at my doorstep, something I wasn't accustomed to handling. This made me feel guilty, just like any other human being would in such a scenario. I spoke with my parents, and they clarified that Rebecca hadn't tried to contact them directly since they had informed her about the ultimatum and the choice they had made. During our conversation, they apologized for everything that had happened in the past and admitted that they were partly to blame for setting the bar too high, which made Rebecca unaccustomed to not being the center of attention. Additionally, they mentioned that Rebecca had recently gone through a devastating breakup around the time I announced my pregnancy. Her boyfriend of almost 2 years had ended the relationship because he wanted to move to another state for work, and Rebecca's desire to try a long-distance relationship was something he couldn't handle, leading him to break up with her. This heartbreak had naturally left her devastated and likely contributed to her bitter feelings about my success in relationships and impending motherhood. Understanding this context gave me some sympathy for her situation, but I couldn't overlook the fact that she had orchestrated such a malicious act by involving Kurt to sabotage my baby shower. No matter how bad a breakup is, I believe that paying my ex-boyfriend to accuse me of cheating on my husband while I was pregnant was completely unacceptable behavior. It was clear that Rebecca's jealousy and inability to cope with her own personal issues led her to take actions that were beyond excusable. Therefore, I firmly believe it's fair to ask my parents not to speak to her again if they wish to maintain contact with me. My parents also confirmed that even without my ultimatum, they would have eventually stopped speaking to Rebecca due to her unacceptable behavior. They recounted how Rebecca had been very angry and aggressive when she first approached them after the incident, yelling and accusing them of treating her like a loser simply because she wasn't married or expecting a child yet. She felt that my parents were disappointed in her, even though they were proud of her achievements as a doctor, and didn't base their pride on her marital status or motherhood. Rebecca had always held onto the belief that because my parents were proud of me, it meant they no longer loved her or saw her as the golden child, which was unfair and based on unrealistic expectations set during our childhood. Rebecca eventually acknowledged these misconceptions and admitted that she believed my parents' pride in me signaled their reduced pride in her. However, her actions at my baby shower, paying Kurt to create such a public and false scandal, were inexcusable. This led my parents to firmly decide that she needed to go away and cease any further attempts to interfere in our lives. After discussing all of this, my parents and I concluded that we had done the right thing by distancing ourselves from Rebecca. Now, I no longer feel guilty about the ultimatum because her actions were too severe to forgive, and her apologies were only sincere once she realized that her actions had cost her the support of our family. Update 2. Last week, Rebecca showed up at my door attempting to apologize to me, which prompted me to share my initial post. Since then, she hasn't made any direct contact with us, because we clearly communicated that we didn't want anything to do with her. We even spoke to several relatives, informing them that Rebecca wouldn't be invited to any of our events, and that we preferred she stay away from future family gatherings until we were comfortable with the situation. We explained the truth about what happened at the baby shower and why my ex-boyfriend had shown up that day. Most of our relatives were shocked and agreed not to keep in touch with Rebecca, understanding the gravity of her actions. As a result, we hadn't heard from her until today. Today, my husband Rick called me while he was at work, which is highly unusual because he is very devoted to his job and rarely takes personal calls during work hours. When I answered, I immediately sensed that something was wrong. He informed me that Rebecca had somehow managed to get to his workplace and was refusing to leave, despite him informing the receptionist that he didn't want to see her at that time. She was sitting in the lobby, creating an embarrassing scene for him by insisting on staying, which was particularly concerning because he had an important meeting with a client coming up. To handle the situation, I decided to unblock Rebecca and speak to her directly to try and get her to leave his workplace. I also reached out to the receptionist, explaining that if Rebecca didn't leave after our phone conversation, they should call security and have her escorted out. I emphasized that she didn't deserve any special treatment, just because she was related to me and should be treated like anyone else in her position would be. I attempted to speak with Rebecca over the phone, explaining that her behavior was highly embarrassing for our family and reflected poorly on her. I told her she needed to leave because she wasn't entitled to disturb Rick at his workplace, as he wasn't involved in any of the personal issues between us. However, Rebecca insisted that Rick could help me see sense, leading to a brief argument. Realizing that further conversation was futile, I instructed the receptionist to have Rebecca escorted out of the building. Ultimately, security had to remove her because she continued to refuse to leave and threw a tantrum in the lobby, even demanding to see Rick while he was in a meeting. Thankfully, she didn't get arrested, but it was clear that her actions were becoming increasingly disruptive and problematic. Update 3. Many people in the comments section suggested that Rick and I should get a restraining order against Rebecca, and I believe that's excellent advice. Rick and I have consulted with a lawyer, and within a few days, we plan to file for a protective order against her. My parents also support this decision, especially after what happened at Rick's workplace. Given that Rebecca is willing to go to such lengths, there's no telling what she might do next. While a restraining order can't guarantee that she will never show up around us or attempt to harm us again, it provides a legal safeguard. If she tries to do anything further, we can have her arrested, which might deter her from making additional attempts to disrupt our lives. Despite the ongoing turmoil, Rick and I remain committed to prioritizing our family's safety and peace of mind. Filing for a restraining order is a significant step towards ensuring that Rebecca's toxic behavior doesn't continue to affect our lives. We understand that while the restraining order may not be a complete solution, it offers a layer of protection and reassurance that we can take action if she continues to harass or threaten us. Our focus now is on healing and building a supportive environment for our growing family, free from the negativity and chaos that Rebecca has introduced into our lives. We are hopeful that with these measures in place, we can move forward and enjoy the joyous moments of welcoming our new baby without further disruptions.